So I'm going to go ahead and get us started. My name is Jamie Ann Jacobin. I'm the Executive Director of the James Renwick Alliance for Craft. We are going to ask people to stay on mute during the talk today. And then if you'd like to, if you are dying to ask a question, you can unmute yourself in the very end. Also, if anybody needs, let's see, the captions, we do have them. You can find them on the bottom of your screen. And we are so pleased to be here today for our coffee and conversation. The James Renwick Alliance for Craft is an organization dedicated to the education, appreciation, and connoisseurship of American craft. And I'm really excited about this program in particular because we have Judy and Jeff here, who are wonderful collectors who recently donated over 40 pieces to the Renwick Gallery. So today's talk is going to be moderated by the Lloyd Herman Curator of Craft, Mary Savig from the Renwick Gallery. And with that, I would like to introduce Mary.
Hi, everybody. I am so excited to be here today. It's great to see so many artists who are included in the exhibition right now at the Renwick. So today I'm really excited to talk with collectors and advocates, Jeffrey Bernstein and Judith Chernoff, about their collection and their transformative gift to the Renwick Gallery, which includes some phenomenal works by Betty Scarpino and Sharon Doughtie. Jeff and Judy, if I may, are dynamic collectors who in 2021 donated 43 sculptural wood artworks to the Renwick. Both Jeff and Judy are trained as physicians, and since 2015, Judy has volunteered as a docent at the Renwick. And in the world of wood, they are widely appreciated as collectors, advocates, connectors, and friends. Their transformative donation builds on the museum's extensive collection of wood art in really exciting and meaningful ways. And we're excited to see how it has already energized interest in this field. I will say that I've given many tours of the exhibition, and I love to end every tour in the Bernstein Chernoff Gallery. It's a really soft landing for our exhausted guests, where everybody can stop and take a deep breath and really absorb the goodness of the wood around them. Their collection has really inspired others to discover the intricacies of wood and to learn more about the makers. So first, I thought we'd learn a little bit more about Jeff and Judy. Jamie, and if you wouldn't mind showing the slide, showing their home. It's pretty wild because I started at the Renwick in January 2020, and my first collecting visit was to see their home and their collection in Maryland. And it just is a very phenomenal space. In some of our early conversations about this show, we talked about like the soul in this room. So I wanted to share some pictures of what their collection looks like in their home. And these beautiful displays really inspired the exhibition. And it was my first visit with a collector, and then my last visit with a collector for many years while the pandemic really changed the world. But this feeling of their home was something that I carried with me a lot, especially while we were planning the exhibition and while we were all also at home during the early phases of the pandemic. So I would just like to chat with Jeff and Judy about their entire collecting journey. So starting off, I would just like to, I think we'd all just like to learn a little bit about you both and what drew you to wood.
Well, thank you, Mary. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. And basically, I will say we did not start out as collectors. This is not what our home looked like when we first started this journey. But the seeds for art appreciation were planted quite early in our lives. We both grew up in environments where art was important. My mother is a fine craft artist who worked in enameling metals and fiber and eventually wove with wire. So art was a part of our home experience, and Jeff's parents collected porcelain and paperweights and often took him to museums. As you noted, we're both physicians. Jeff is a gastroenterologist. I've retired. I'm an internist, but a retired internist. But I majored in art history in college as a prelude for going to medical school. And as you noted, I've been a docent at the Renwick, which is something I cherish very much. We've been married for 37 and a half years. And we have 2 grown sons who have been on this journey with us. And we appreciate all of the craft mediums, but we like to say that we major in wood, we minor in baskets, and we have a little bit of everything else. So the question comes up, why wood? Well, who doesn't love the innate beauty of wood? There are endless varieties of wood, and it's a very warm medium with amazing tactile properties. On my tours at the Renwick, I always talk about the importance of touch in craft. How many times do you wish you could touch objects, especially wood objects, at a museum? I also love knowing that the unfinished rough outside of a tree hides basically a magic interior full of grain and figure and color and patterns. Also, I think we both appreciate, Jeff and I both appreciate working with wood is quite a challenge. We appreciate the craftsmanship and skill that artists who commit to this material make. Each species of wood has different properties, so it's really learning and studying about a particular aspects of a particular wood. And every piece of wood is different because of the environment in which it is found. And wood can continue to change even after the piece is made. Artists who know this, take this into account when they're making their works, and that's different than many of the other mediums. So as with all well-made craft, regardless of the medium, we love the stories behind the pieces and what they make us feel and what they cause us to think about.
That's beautiful. Could you talk more specifically about some of the turning points in your collecting path, including specific artists or artworks?
Sure. We started collecting, like, not thinking that we would have a collection like we have today. We started, like most collectors, buying things that we liked. And we look back, and it's about 29, 30 years ago, we just happened to come across a craft gallery and walked in. And on the wall were these kinetic wood sculptures by David Roy. And we bought one of them, and we still have it today. And we enjoy looking at it. And we didn't think much about it at the time, but 2 years later, in 1996, we discovered the American Craft Council's Baltimore Craft Show, which seemed to be the largest collection of artists in general selling their work. And we were amazed by the creativity and the quality of the work we saw. And we bought 2 pieces at that point. One was a wall niche in wood by John Dodd and a gold and bronze leaf quilt by Lucinda Karlstrom. And so we continued going to the craft show, and over the next 6 years, we sort of looked at everything, and sometimes we'd buy a piece of glass or a ceramic. We weren't sure where we were going with it until we started noticing we were more attracted to the wood booths and talking to the wood artists. There was one artist that we got to know pretty well, and we finally, in 2002, bought our first major wood piece by Mark Nance called Fusion, which is in this exhibition at the Renwick. It's an Amboina burl vessel that is enclosed by a blackwood exoskeleton, which makes the piece look like it's floating. It's flawlessly executed. It's sort of hidden behind the head of the first piece.
Yeah, it's right where the head is.
But we brought that home, and we looked at it, and we said, at the time, we spent a lot more money than we thought we should have on a piece of art. And we were like, what's going on here? We didn't really know where we were headed, but we knew we were headed somewhere. And so that was a big turning point, buying that piece. Over the next 2 years were several turning points. We discovered the following year Delmano Gallery. This is before we knew a lot of the wood artists. That was a gallery that's not in existence now, but at the time in Los Angeles was one of the biggest wood art galleries for artists in wood. And we were on a vacation with our kids, and they were tired of seeing galleries. But we said we just want to go to one gallery in Los Angeles. We went to Del Monte, and we said we'd just be here for a half an hour. We spent 3.5 to 4 hours there. Our kids were very patient. Ray Lear, who's since passed, was there and said, "You want to see the back room?" And we said, "Back room? What's a back room?" So he took us in the back room where a lot of work was stored. And we were like two kids in a toy store. We said, it was amazing work. And the first piece I picked up, I said, "Ray, who did this?" And it was a piece by William Hunter and Cocobolo. And second piece I picked up was light and beautifully shaped. And I said, "Who made this?" And it was David Ellsworth. And it seemed like every piece I picked up later on, we learned were master wood artists that we have since become very good friends with many of them and have pieces in our collection from many of them. And then the next thing that turning point that same year was discovering collectors of wood art, which is now named the Wood Art Alliance. But we found just by searching the internet about wood art, because we became real interested in it, that they were having a symposium of this organization that we knew nothing about. So we went to the symposium in Santa Fe that was organized by our friends David and Susie Wall. And it was just a phenomenal experience for us because there were 150 people there. Half were half were artists and half were collectors. And many of the people we met that day became good friends over the years. And we learned a lot from that experience. And then the year later, we discovered the other two big wood organizations, the American Association of Woodturners, which has a symposium every year and has exhibitions at that symposium in an instant gallery, which translates into a target-rich environment for purchasing wood art. And then the Collectors of Wood Art, the Wood Turning Center, which is now appropriately named the Museum in Art and Wood, where we met Albert Leacoff and many other collectors, and things just expanded from there. So when we talk about collecting, we started delving into the field, getting involved with it, reading about it. And where we live in Maryland, we're lucky that we have the American Craft Council's Baltimore show, the Washington Craft Show, the Smithsonian Craft Show. We started going to the Philadelphia craft shows, the gallery shows in SOFA New York and SOFA Chicago, and went on art exhibitions and went on art trips and went to studios and just became totally immersed into it to the point where we started buying more and more and taking over more of the playrooms for our kids in our home.
And here, what you are all looking at is the Renwick's Gallery, where we've tried to reimagine the feeling of their house through some of our casework and clusterings. Maybe you want to show the next one, Jamie Ann. Sort of related to taking over your children's playrooms as they grew. As collectors, your collection did shape your everyday lives in profound ways as you were living with these works. Can you reflect on what it's like to live with these inspiring works?
Well, as you saw in the initial photos of our home, you see we live with the pieces all around us, and they provide a constant source of contemplation, reflection, and memories of happy stories as to how these pieces were acquired. But when we look at the pieces, we don't just see the objects, we hear the voices of the artists who created them. So our house is very full. With lots of voices. We've developed personal and close relationships with many of the artists in our collection. And we've been to many of their studios, and most of them have visited us in our home. Part of our journey was really training our eyes in how to see. And I sort of, when we talk about how we acquired works, I think when we first started, we were very focused on the wood itself. So we were very attracted to the beauty and simplicity of simple turned vessels. But as we saw more and we began to understand how artists enhance wood, we appreciated coloring and pyrography, painting, piercing, segmentation, etc., carving, what artists do besides of the vessel. And finally, we grew to appreciate sculpture in the more abstract forms and ideas behind works. So in our home, we really enjoy the presentation of the pieces. We feel like we're the curators of our collections. So we get to show pieces in conversation with one another. And we think about that a lot when we place pieces. We do try to find commonalities between pieces, whether it's the wood itself or the color that's used or similar techniques, or even placing works by spouses next to each other. And occasionally there's a piece that doesn't play well with others.
I remember you saying that, and that's how it factored into our exhibition too, when we realized, yes, these don't play well together, so they're going to be separated.
And you did a great job with that. Yes. So we've also, this has been a family experience, I would say. We've involved our kids along the way, our kids who are now grown men, but when they were little, or we would bring new pieces into the home and we would put them on the dining room table. That was sort of the way station until we figured out where to put them. And when they were young, we started asking them, what do you think, when we would bring a piece home? And, when they're 8 or 10 years old, they like this one, they like this one, they don't like this one. And if you paid more than $5 for this one, you got a bad deal. But as they were presented with more and more pieces, they started to articulate why they liked something or what they saw in the pieces. And so through the years, we encouraged them to say what they were seeing. And this is something I also always do with visitors at the Renwick, is your eyes, whatever you see is real, and there's no right or wrong answer. So I encourage people to talk about what they're seeing with art objects. So collecting for us has really been a framework for so much more than just the act of obtaining an object. In addition to our connection with artists, we've developed friendships with other collectors. We've immersed ourselves in the field. We read, we attend shows, as Jeff said, we discuss subject matter about this whole field. We learn from artists' studio visits. We've talked to many museum and gallery people, attended symposiums. There's always an opportunity to learn somewhere. And we've become part of this wood community, which is a very warm and inviting group, not surprisingly, very down to earth. There's a lot of sharing among the artists and the collectors and between the artists and collectors. And I appreciate that. And I think you do too, very, very much. We've also had a lot of groups to our home, and we do this for collection, so that they can see the collection. We really enjoy sharing our collection with artists and collectors, and even people in the community who maybe have never even seen a wooden bowl. So introducing people unfamiliar with art and wood has been as much fun for us as sharing with those who are very familiar with the field.
Judy, it's so interesting hearing you talk about how your collecting taste evolved, because unknowingly that's how I've been introducing it in tours. When we walk in, I love pointing out, you can see it in this photo, but the beautiful Dixie Biggs that's on the second shelf in the cabinet to the left. I use that as a way of pointing out, like, some wood turning just brings out like how beautiful the wood is. And then key ways that your collection has helped the Renwick build our collection is that it includes these really virtuoso techniques in segmentation and piercing and carving. And this is where our collection has grown in really exciting ways because of your donation. So that's also how I talk about it. And it's like been parallel to your collecting journey. And also, I'm sure, about just the history of wood art in the US. So it's interesting that this is all coming together in one place. So I guess related, can you both talk about when and why you decided to make the decision to donate a selection of works to the Renwick, and what considerations led to this decision?
Sure. as our collection has grown, it's gotten very big, and we had this museum quality collection, and our boys like many of the pieces, but they only want a certain percentage of them, which is still leaves what to do with them. And this is something that many collectors who've been collecting for a long time have worried and wondered about what they were going to do. We didn't want to burden our sons with having to dispossess hundreds of pieces, many of which they don't know what they are and where to go. So we did what many other people did. We talked to a lot of other collectors who were in the same position and learned a lot from what other people have done, including Flora Bressler and Arthur and Jane Mason. Sadly, Arthur has passed on. Dina and Jerry Kaplan, and sadly, Dina has passed on. Dave and Ruth Waterbury, and many, many others who have started the process and learned from them. And we learned a couple things. First of all, putting pieces in museums is important for artists, because artists like not only the recognition, but like the ability to know that curators appreciate what they do. So that's one aspect of it. And the other aspect is it has the opportunity to be seen by a lot of other people. Even when you give a piece to a museum, it's not always going to be on exhibition, but even with the 100 of tours or 100 plus tours in our home, a few hundred people have seen the collection. By putting it in a museum like this exhibition that we were lucky enough to do at the Renwick, now I don't know how many people have been there in the last 10 or 11 months, but probably tens of thousands or a few 100,000 people have seen the collection, and many people who would not have seen the wood, who came for the other parts of the exhibition, which are excellent and phenomenal, were exposed to wood art. Why Renwick? We, as Mary knows, talked to many of her predecessor curators who were always interested also in adding pieces, but never came to fruition until 2 years ago, when everything came at the right time. I think it was, we wanted to do it at the Renwick because this was our home base, because it's in our backyard. We've gone to the Renwick Gallery more than any other gallery in the country. And Judy is a docent there, and there's a big framework of wood art already there, but none really in the last 20 years from major artists that have doing outstanding work. So everything came to fruition, and Mary and Nora, the curators, were willing to put this exhibition or donation as part of the exhibition, and it fit in well. And we love the fact that they had full reign to pick the pieces they wanted to add to the collection, and also how they presented the work. And we love the fact that they presented it like how we live with it. It's the only part of this exhibition that has 2 couches where people can sit and ponder and look at the pieces. And the final thing I'll say is, one of the things when Judy gives tours, or when we give tours together, I don't give tours of the other part of the collection. She's the expert on that. But when we sit in our room before or after and just watch people go through, we love seeing the reactions that people have from seeing the pieces, hearing what they're saying, asking questions. And sometimes we just sit there and listen and watch. And sometimes when they ask certain questions, we'll stand up and say, would you like to know more about that piece? And that's really fun for us. So the Renwick was where we wanted to start.
Yeah, I also love watching people. I mean, they've gone through this, I think, very emotional exhibition, and then you do provide this amazing landing that is all one material, and I think it is just so full of life and soul. And then it continues the themes. We're really trying to learn more about where artists are coming from and how they're trying to change the world. So it's been great to have this as sort of our exclamation point at the end of an exhibition.
Thank you. And one thing I just add, of the gift that was given to the Renwick, 23 of the artists were new to the Renwick. To see their reaction to hearing and then seeing their pieces on display has just been wonderful feeling for us.
Yeah, and that was really important for us, was to be able to, because there is a question about how does the museum donation work? And Some of it does depend on quality, but Jeff and Judy actually have many more works in their collection that are museum quality, but sometimes it overlaps with what we already have. So our goal was to build specifically on the Renwick's collection. So I hope that means other museums are able to acquire these other amazing works, because 43 is just a fraction of their international collection. So for us, it was being able to add new people and new techniques to the museum. That's part of our collecting plan. So we really enjoyed working with Jeff and Judy on this. And if you have any further thoughts, otherwise, I'm happy to transition to the artists who are in the show.
Sure.
And then we'll all come back together at the end to talk. So first, I'm very honored to introduce Betty Scarpino. I think somebody in the comments early on said the amazing Betty is here. So I feel like that's all I need to say. But Betty is an extraordinary and seemingly tireless force in the craft community. She's a prolific artist, and Betty really does it all, except for maybe, I don't know if you sleep. Her career, you sleep? Okay, because I don't know how you get I don't know how you get it all done. Her career began in the 70s when she was making furniture and producing functional work. She has a degree in industrial arts from the University of Missouri, where she also studied wood carving and wood sculpture techniques that led her to create her really evocative, fluid, wood carved and wood sculpted wood artworks. Scarpino also makes woodcut prints, and her work has been featured in numerous exhibitions and publications. In 2015, she received the Lifetime Achievement Award from the Collectors of Wood Art, which is now the Wood Art Alliance. So we're going to hear a little bit from Betty today. Welcome, Betty.
Thank you. Thank you, Mary. And as everyone has heard, Jeff and Judy not only collect wood art, they share their collection in a variety of ways, often hosting individuals and groups in their home. And I can attest to that. I've been there 4 or 5 times with groups of wood turners. In addition, they personally know the artists whose work they collect. I know when Judy and I and Jeff get together, we often talk about my 2 boys and her 2 boys. They are true ambassadors. Thank you so much for your support of wood art over the years.
Thank you.
Mary, Jamie Ann, and the staff of the Renwick, what a fabulous exhibit. It's an honor to be invited to talk today and a bonus to share this moment with my friend, Sharon. First image, which is coming up from you. Okay. In this photo, I'm standing next to my sculpture Inviolate portal in the exhibit this present moment. Depending on how a person winds their way through the exhibit, this display case is the last stop on the tour. As they say, save the best for last. In all seriousness, I am beyond delighted to have my work be part of this exhibit. Often, titles of my work provide hints to my thought process during the many hours it takes to cut, carve, sand, texture, and paint. This sculpture is from my Deconstructed Disc series and can be considered abstract figurative. As such, envision a woman's body internally cradling an egg. In our culture, white represents purity. The title Inviolate portal and what those words mean seems especially significant in today's political climate. On the other hand, while I was standing next to the display case last May, a woman stopped to take a photo. She said she teaches architecture and would be including the image as an example of architectural related sculpture. So interpret as you wish. Next image. The wood I used is ash. The bowl on the left shows its natural color, a rather plain looking timber. Because it's a ring porous wood, however, it's perfectly suited to a dye and liming wax finish. I use an alcohol-based dye, in this case, blood red, then sealed that with spray lacquer, followed by an application of liming wax, which I worked into the open pores of the grain. Next image. I consider myself a wood artist and use a variety of machines and tools to carve sculpture. Inviolate portal started as a square chunk of wood that I cut into a rough round shape using the bandsaw, then attached that turning blank to my lathe. The lathe rotates the wood while a sharp tool cuts shavings. And you're going to see some shavings in one of the images that Sharon shows. These are just mini shavings. The process is called wood turning or just turning. The result is a turned object. Years ago, I gave a talk at the Fort Wayne, Indiana Art Museum in conjunction with the touring exhibit Connections, Turned Wood from the Windgate International Artist Residency Program. The audience was comprised primarily of woodturners, of course, but a few museum patrons were present. When I finished my talk and asked for questions, the first question was from a non-woodturner. What is a lathe? She wanted to know. Ever since, I'm more mindful of my audience. Next image. Turned wood has inherent limitations for artistic expression. Wood turn objects, for the most part, are round. After railing against this constraint for years, I gradually came to embrace the roundness and began exploring what lies within cylinders, discs, and plates. I cut and carved to deconstruct these turn forms, then reconstruct them with more carving. Relationships and stories emerge. The possibilities are vast, exciting, and endless. On the left is an early turn and cut disc that's similar to Inviolate Portal. Its title is Bearing Blue Eggs and is somewhat autobiographical. The title Bearing Blue Eggs is slightly ambiguous. I have given birth to children, one meaning of bearing. The other meaning has to do with the challenges of being a mother. There were times when I could hardly bear it. Next image. Taking that same altered disc form and positioning it upside down offers the possibility of an entirely different interpretation. While the opening is still a portal, the form doesn't contain another object other than its stand. The opening encourages the viewer to wonder, a passage to where? Or in this case, the title Canyon Bridge offers a clue. Next, or the last image. For this turned disc, I cut it entirely apart, then proceeded to carve. Whenever there is a more than one object positioned together, stories can be imagined. My photographer was so intrigued with this sculpture that he ended up making a collage of various positions, which he sent off to a friend, who in turn offered the perfect title, Body Language, Dancing Around the Obvious. Intentionally abstract figurative, some arrangements are suggestive, some embrace with care, altogether rather like a courtship dance. Thank you everyone for being here, and hand it back over to you, Mary.
Thank you so much, Betty. Sharon is graciously joining us today from Hawaii, so I think it's pretty early, so I hope you've had coffee, Sharon. Sharon has been turning wood since the 1990s. She has devised techniques in woodworking to express herself in deeply personal ways. Sharon began her career as an apprentice in a cabinet making shop where a lathe piqued her curiosity, and since the late 1990s, she has participated in numerous exhibitions, many in Hawaii, and her work has been subject in many publications. Sharon, we're really excited to hear more from you today.
Thank you, Mary. So, am I on? Can you hear me?
Mhm.
Okay. So as far as thank yous go, I'll just start out with saying what Betty said. But I'll just add a little bit. So thank you, Jeff and Judy, for supporting us by collecting our work. We get to do what we love because of you. And thank you for your generosity and generosity of spirit, for your enthusiasm for and interest in wood art. And then Thank you, Mary, Jamie Ann, and everyone at the Renwick for mounting the show and for all your work on it. We're deeply honored to be included in it. Thank you for inviting me to this talk. And like Betty said, it's an honor to participate and a bonus to share this moment with her. Okay, so first slide, please. Okay, so this piece is Four Winds, Two Poles, and it's from the Knotwork series. It is the earth, the poles anchor it, and the winds stream around it. I've always imagined the knotwork to be weavings. If I could lift it off the wood, the warp and weft are correct, and the knot could be hung on a wall. To me, the stippling and contour lines are the rocks. The knotwork itself represents stories or ideas. This series was born from being in a volcanic explosion on Hawaii Island in 1993. It took years to find an authentic way to speak to that event in my work. All the pieces are what, in my imagination, petroglyphs might have evolved into had the Irish arrived in Hawaii first. I didn't want to take anything from Hawaiian cultural motifs and drew from my own Irish bloodline. Next picture, please. I'll just say I'm turning Norfolk Island pine there, and it has lovely lovely long fibers. So we get these great ribbons. But back to the story. At 9:30, it was a calm night before the explosion. About 30 people were scattered about enjoying the evening. Pat Kramer, my then boyfriend, now husband, and I were sitting on a hill of A'a, around 10 feet high. A'a is rough, chunky lava. The mountain was to our left, the ocean to our right, and straight ahead, another A'a hill was hiding the lava river that was flowing into the ocean. To see it, we would have had to walk across a 100-yard pahoehoe field, which is pillowy lava rock. We tried a couple of times, but something felt off, and it always pays to listen to that little voice inside. Next, please. At one point, 2 lava windows on our left closed, and the trapped energy had to go somewhere. Very shortly after, 3 earthquakes violently shook the land and us in succession. There was a large boom, chunks of rock blew into the air, and a lava fountain that reached at least 200 feet high appeared 300 feet in front of us, where the lava river had been flowing. The fountaining happened both for an eternity and for a couple of seconds. Everything went into slow motion, and I disappeared into the wonder of it all. Next, please. Pat jumped on me to cover me, and I knew we were going to die. Lava arced past us, and we could hear it splattering all around us as we hunkered down. It went past everyone who was there that night and splattered onto the land. The shrubbery and plants nearby caught on fire. My left side was exposed, and I felt something coming my way and knew I was going to be hit. My left back was impacted by a small rock of cooled lava, which tore me out from under Pat and caused me to roll down the A'a hill. I was torn up, fractured ribs, legs, and hands covered with cuts and bruises. Pat was uninjured. A man who had been taking pictures on a cantilevered ledge by the lava river fell in and died. Amazingly, no one else died or was burned by lava. There were a few minor injuries, steam burns from lava hitting the ocean, some bruises. We later read that a 1/4 acre of land had blown into the air. And next slide, please. I was groaning at the bottom of the hill, and Pat came and got me to my feet. My first shaky words were, "That was incredible." It was one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen, the birth of land. I had dreams of beaches with oceans of lava breaking into waves for years. I didn't tell anyone except close friends what truly drove this series for a long time. That pivotal moment hunkered down on the lava hill is etched into my being. One part of me was huddled under my ribcage and the other was expanding, ready to lift out. It was a deeply personal event. As I recovered from all the wounds, the pieces didn't go back together in quite the same way. I appreciate having gone through this experience and am grateful for all the insight and inspiration it's given me. And thank you all for coming. And back to you, Mary.
I need a moment to recover from that, Sharon. Thank you for sharing that story. I can really see how it is brought to bear in your work. So I wanted to bring all of us together just to chat a little bit more. And if you have any questions, please just either raise your hand and Jamie Ann and I will keep an eye on it or put it in and I can read it. So first, I think wood turning, and I'm sorry to paint with some broad brushstrokes here, but I think compared to the other craft mediums, it has some very unique characteristics. So it's very geographically diverse, and I have found that artists, I think, are more reliant on workshops and one-on-one teaching models compared to other craft mediums that might be based more at art schools. So interpersonal relationships are especially important in the wood community. And so I just wanted to note that Betty and Sharon are best friends, and they know Jeff and Judy very well. They all have a long history together. So I'm just wondering, given your long relationships with each other, would you take a moment to discuss what you've learned from each other, and perhaps share a memory from meeting each other and working with each other that shaped your own practices, whether it's in the studio or as collectors? I see Betty first, so maybe Betty, is it okay if I start with you? Or
Sure.
anyone else want to go first?
I'll go first. When I think back about the connection to wood turning and wood art, it comes to mind, first of all, as community. I just can't get over how much I have learned about my personal life and how important friendships and community is. At first, I thought it was just, okay, make wood, make art, all these important things in life. And now that I'm almost 74, I realize that the most important aspect of all of this is the community. That's it.
Mhm.
I would just add something a little bit different from a collecting standpoint. All these pieces that we've collected, and this is a good example from Betty and Sharon's talk, they can stand by themselves and be appreciated. But then when you hear the stories sometimes behind the inspiration for the piece, it gives it a whole different dimension. And everyone can see the piece any way they want, of course, but when you hear these very personal stories about what inspired the pieces to come about, it just enhances the value to us as owners of those pieces, and sharing and sharing them with other people.
So I agree with what Betty said about it's really all about relationship and community. And I'll just tell the story of how we met. So, I mean,
Great story.
both, yeah, well, both Betty and I and Jeff, Judy wasn't at the first conference, but Betty and I met in 2005. I had put her name in to demonstrate for our club, our wood turning club here, and she found out that I had put her name in. So I drove her around the island. We went all around the North Shore and became friends then. And that later that year, I went to our first conference and met Jeff there. And it was my first time being at any large public event. And I didn't know what to expect. I had no idea of anything, and met Jeff, and he bought 4 Winds 2 Poles. And I was just, it was a lovely surprise, a lovely meeting. And kind of, yeah, it was good. So.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.
I wish you would drive me around Hawaii. I think everyone would go around Hawaii with you and be your best friend at the end. I've never been, but actually at the opening, Andy Cole, who's on the Zoom, he gave me some of these chocolate covered macadamia nuts, which I still dream about. They were so delicious. So I do need to visit you all. My second question is, a connecting thread is, as you've all described your processes, a few shared values arise. And for me, I heard a lot about the idea of like presence and purpose. And that's something that we've been thinking a lot about in the exhibition, of how presence of mind can really help you as an artist explore the world in a different way, and then also make that available to other people so people can see your vantage point. And Betty, I really appreciate that you brought up how your work Inviolate Portal kind of changes with circumstances. especially in places like Washington, D.C. We are, for those of you who have not visited the Renwick, we are across the street from the White House. So we have this proximity to power that's really interesting. So when things are happening in the political sphere, it is very local. Whenever something happens in the Supreme Court or at the White House, people are in our gallery and it's very visceral. So I'm just wondering if, you know, just to get to sort of like the fiber of the exhibition, if you all might talk about how, with your work, how you're thinking about this idea of purpose. Betty mentioned care. Sharon, you had a work called Nurture, and just how your processes, and that can also include advocacy and collecting, do help us imagine and make a better world, and what that means to you personally.
I'll go first again, not that I need to go first, but your comment at the beginning of this, if I ever sleep, and how do I get so much work done? Many years ago when I was in Canada, I was giving a demonstration, and there was Marilyn Campbell happened to be in the audience, and she has one child, I have two. And she only had, throughout the whole day, she only had one question. She came up to me at lunch and she said, "You have two children and you get a lot of work done. I only have one. How do you do it?" And my response was, "You can get a lot done in 20 minutes. And she has brought that up to me a couple of times over the years, that response meant a lot to her, which gets to the point of helping each other through their journey and also allowing them to discover some of the things that might work for them. So yeah, I can get a lot done in 20 minutes. So I leave something on my workbench so that I can come back to it. I'll get interrupted. If it's there, I can pick it up again and just continue. Mm-hmm. So influencing others, helping others, encouraging others.
I agree with that, and very much, actually. And then also, there's just the sort of thread of the work. You know how you go away from it and just think about it and dream about it. I mean, I've actually dreamed solutions to things that I'm working on. How am I going to do it? How am I going to make it? And one of the things that's most important to me is to really be true to myself and not turn into sort of a factory of another spiral knot or something like that, to actually have a purpose and a message. And some of the things that I'm going to move on to are that's just one of the most important things to me, is to have something that I'm really trying to say and to be true to that.
I think for Jeff and Judy, yeah, it's like a little bit different of a perspective, but I do think, even just thinking about supporting artists in the wood community, and then also making the decision to donate these works to a public institution like the Smithsonian is about allowing people who have no familiarity with wood, who are just in the galleries, really be able to it makes the work accessible to people. And I think that is making a better world. And just being able to see Sharon and Betty's viewpoints in the gallery is such an important way of I think opening up new vantage points to people, and that's why they're there to look at art. Judy, you mentioned in your tours, you talk about the importance of touch, and I think that's a big part of it. Could you maybe expand on that a little bit more so we can get some of your wonderful education that you share with our visitors?
Well, in the current show, there is, I always start with this very small bracelet-like implement that was created for the purpose of providing fingerprints to accompany. Let me back up a minute. during COVID, at the beginning of COVID, when we were all separated and you couldn't even go into a funeral with someone else, the artist's husband's grandmother passed, and his mother had to sit alone at the funeral. So the artist created a bracelet of her husband's fingerprints to accompany his mother at the funeral because he
Wow.
physically couldn't be there. I start with that piece because of how we were deprived of touch during COVID and how so much of craft is about the tactility. There is always, no matter what we're talking about, people want to put their hands on quilts. They want to put their hands on wood. It's sort of like this very basic instinct that we all share. So you don't go to a gallery that has paintings and say, I want to put my hands all over the painting, unless it's maybe Van Gogh where the paint is coming off the canvas. But I always start with that. And I think it also allows people to realize that that is an okay reaction and that it's really quite important, because we're so used to being in a museum and using our eyes, but we really can use more than just our eyes to experience pieces. And I just think wood is so tactile. You know, there's nothing like holding a piece of wood that's been so smoothly sanded that it feels like butter, or even to close your eyes sometimes and feel the ridges or feel the grain pattern or whatever it is. So that's how I tie it in.
And I'll just add one thing. One of the most common questions I get, not from collectors, but from friends, wasn't it hard to give away these pieces to the Renwick? And don't you miss them? And the answer is, of course, we miss them, and we would love to have the collection intact forever. But the thing that we miss the most when we walk into the museum is holding these pieces, because we have taken them off the shelf, out of the cabinets, and shown people, handed them to people, let them feel it. And once you get into a museum, that's no longer, it's forbidden. So that's been the hardest thing, because every piece in this collection we have handled multiple times. And some of them, so when we give the tours, we talk about how it felt to touch the texture or the lightness or something that's wood that's heavier than, because of the techniques that were used.
And I'm looking at Graham Priddle right now. His piece, we like the two reflections. We always would hold up, and Graham taught us this. You look into it and it's like infinity. So we have to try to explain that to people, because we actually physically can't do that now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes, I was so happy to visit your house because I could hold things. Now, you know, I would have to have gloves and it would be very different. Someone made a comment that museums banish touch, and in a lot of ways we do, because we have to protect them in perpetuity. And we had touch cards, but I think we are not yet able to bring those back because of COVID. So hopefully that can start changing again too. But yeah, it's a hard thing to convey, and I hear this a lot from the quilt community. The worst thing for quilts is other quilters, because they want to, you know, always like touch and inspect. And so we always have to watch the quilters in our gallery. And I'm assuming it's the same for wood turners, because it is about the weight of some of these beautifully turned vessels. And you have to really hold it to truly appreciate it across many senses. And I wish we had ways of conveying that more. I know Jeff and I are big Star Trek fans, so I think someday we'll have a holodeck built in the Renwick where you can hold a hologram of maybe even work at a lathe or something. So things to imagine in the future. Does anyone have any questions for our wonderful guests?
This is Jamie Donaldson in Georgetown, Kentucky. My academic background long ago was in psychology and philosophy. I'm a retired professional photographer. And I've been turning for 36 years. One of my early mentors and teachers was Rudy Ozolnik, and only the old timers will recognize that name. This is something that I'm really concerned about for our future, because our youngsters, I turned my first bowl in high school shop in 1959. Our children are not exposed to wood anymore. Our membership of the American Association of Wood Turners is fading into perpetuity because we old guys are passing away, and there is no resource readily available in school systems now for young people to be introduced to wood turning. This is something that I'm really concerned about, because wood is a wonderful material. It grows on trees. It's readily available in most parts of the country. And it's a shame to me, as both the collector, I have 214 pieces in my collection. It's a shame to me to see this material, these techniques, this resource of information fading away as we old timers are dying off.
Yeah, I think I'm an old timer too. I mean, I think Rudy is very, very well known. And I've read so many interviews with wood turners who talk about their introduction to wood was through a high school shop class. That's a very common story, and I agree with you. I don't know what that looks like right now.
I'd like to
go ahead,
comment
Betty.
on that. My degree actually is in industrial arts, and the people that I went to school with trained as an industrial arts majors. And yes, the shop classes went away, but they're starting to come back. And on a positive note, the Indiana State Museum, which has a couple of my pieces, contacted me last year wanting to know if I could make something that was similar to the piece that's in their collection, which is very much finished like Inviolate Portal. It's ash wood and it's got the dye and the liming wax on it. So I made another smaller piece that was very much like it, cut it in half, and then gave them one section of it. And what they did is they mounted my sculpture in a vitrine, and then right outside of it, they mounted the little piece of wood that was similar to it, so that the kids, and this was in the kids' touching gallery, can go and fondle it and feel it and imagine what it might feel like. So I think these things are coming back. I think museums are aware of it, and I think schools are aware of it too. So I'm not unhappy about the direction.
And I think YouTube has an incredible amount of information on wood turning that I think is where a lot of younger people are finding it. And hopefully that can bring them to a shop and learn multiple techniques. Go ahead, Sharon, go ahead.
Add something too is like maybe because wood is such a large part of the culture here in Hawaii, there are wood shops here. Like I just brought a bunch of wood to a high school boy that I know from our shop yesterday, so he could work with it.
This is Linda Smith-Buga. I just wanted to say about our mobile wood shop that we've created for Washington, D.C. And we are going to one high school in a lower economic area of DC and teaching woodworking. It's an everyday program for a year. And it's amazing. The students have never touched wood before, never touched tools. And so this is just one speck in the returning. And another school wants us to bring the mobile wood shop because they closed their shop. It was a fantastic shop before. And the principal was saying, we really need to get back to the trades. So it's, we're doing a little speck in that direction.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, I'm actually, I want to thank everyone for being here, and thank you so much for sharing your stories, because it is 2:00. I don't want to keep us much longer. And I had just recently took a wood turning class just for fun. So maybe it'll make a comeback similar to how ceramics has kind of, everyone takes ceramic date night classes. Thank you all for joining us. Mary, during our rehearsal, you said something so interesting, and it was about how wood and wood turning and wood art in all of the cases here has been a really important part of everyone's lives and has documented important parts in your lives. So Sharon, I think your story was an easy example, but Betty also talking about motherhood and Judy talking about, and Jeff with your sons. I think that it has been such an amazing and interesting influence, which hopefully we share today with others. So thank you everyone for joining us. Thanks for everyone who was in attendance. We do have some upcoming events at the James Renwick Alliance for Craft this weekend. Actually, we have Jack Motch, who is a wood artist, mostly furniture, and Morgan Hill, who is our Chrysalis Awardee, which is an emerging artist award. Both of them will be in DC doing a workshop and also a lecture. The lecture will also be online. So please register, and we have lots of other programs and events. But Mary, thank you again for acting as moderator, and Sharon, Betty, Jeff, and Judy, thank you for participating.
Thank you for having
Thank
us.
you.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you all.
Bye.